The issue we are trying to repair is whenever we try to turn this thing on by picking a thing, it'll kick off and say obstruction. As you can see, it's blinking obstruction every time we try to turn this on. I went to flip it over to see if there was anything in obstructing the mechanism. There's all kinds of crap in there. So my guess is there's something inside of there that's tricking some kind of sensor. So what I'm going to do is try to take this apart and see if there's a means to remove whatever that's in the way. I recommend using a drill. So you're going to remove all of the screws to Philip. I recommend using a drill. Makes it a lot faster. It looks like there's about 16 of these screws that we have to remove. Interference if it's something. You know what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pick it up and shake it and see if anything falls out. Okay. Oh, gear came out. Look at that. That's not good. So now I'm going to take these out. Okay, progress so far. We were unable to clear the interference by doing anything less than removing the corral that holds the slider that holds the seat, which I will emphasize later. We were unable to do so, so I decided to go a little deeper, which entailed removing the screws that were in here out, which then allows you to lift this plate off that goes from here to actually see what's going on in here and see if we can see what the obstruction is. Yeah, something definitely got in the way and caused this thing to basically tear itself up from the inside, but I think we're going to be able to fix it. Because this cap came off. So what I'm going to do, put that back on. So it looks like our problem is now I need to be able to re-secure this housing, because by not doing that it allows the gear to bounce up and then it interferes with itself. I think that's what muckers it up. So now what I got to do is go even deeper into this thing by removing this top plate to be able to get down in there to re-secure the carrier, the drive carriers. Okay, we got a little further than we thought we'd have to go. This is the scissor that, the scissor thingy that holds the whole seat. I had to take that off with some more screws. I will be a little more cautious as I put it back together. I'll show you how I did this. But here was the problem, okay? This wasn't on here, okay? So every time you go to give this thing torque, it's just going to hop out and it would trigger the interference, which makes sense because there's friction. The motor can't drive the way it's supposed to if this thing's hopping out of where it's supposed to. There's these little rubber things that sit on either side. They work as a caster, like a rubber bearing that allows this worm gear to ride somewhat freely. So now that I have this off, I'm going to reattach this housing that wasn't even close to where it belonged. I'm going to put these screws back in. It looks like they're all broken, which this thing basically ripped itself apart because something or someone was on this thing way too big for it. And I see why these things fall apart. They probably sell this whole little housing right here, because that's all this thing really needs is this housing that this all rides on. But obviously I'm going to try and do it the cheap way at first and see if this stuff even holds together. So the proper way to fix this would be to replace this housing. I'm not ready to do that on this thing that we're not even sure is going to be okay after we even do this part. So what I'm going to do is put a couple screws in here that I can, and I'm going to zip tie this thing down, and we're going to see what happens. I'm going to do an X pattern, like in one way and out the other. And I'm going to use my short guys. Once I do this, we're gonna start using. I'm gonna put my baby in this thing, and if it holds up, you guys will know about it. If it lasts 5 minutes, you'll know about it. If it lasts until she outgrows it, I might forget about it. You just want to make sure that your zips aren't going to interfere with the lift. Keep all that stuff out of the way. If you look at how this works, there is some swiveling going on, and you want that. You'll want as little interference as possible, because that's what caused this whole problem, was interference. And then the weakest point had to give, which ended up being the plastic housing that holds the motor this time. It's kind of interesting though. This whole thing works off one motor. It's all a bunch of little drive gears with one motor. Okay, so now I have my zip ties pretty tight. I got my screws in there. Nothing's jiggling around that was jiggling before, so we're going to put this thing back together. That's what makes this suck up. It's just lots of interference. This is all it takes. So then, these are where your Allen keys go. There's one on either side. There's one right here. Ended up being the problem is when I had the housing fall apart because of too much weight, it popped the drive belt off. So I had to take the whole assembly apart up to the point where it was up in the air so I could get to the drive belt to put that back on, to put everything else back together. Okay, so when this failed, I put longer screws in and zip tied it down, and then I had to lift up the assembly to get to the drive belt to reattach the belt. We're going to put it all back together now. Another note, when you go to flip this entire assembly over, there are little keeper nuts that are behind your bolt that holds the little swivel together, okay? Right here. When you go to flip this over to go to that drive belt, those are going to fall out, and then you're going to be wondering why your screws don't fit no more. So grab those before you go to flip it over. I just had to sit here for 15 minutes trying to find them. Okay, as you can see, I got it to work. The housing fell apart because somebody was rough housing on it. I secured the housing back together, put the belt back on it, and you can run test these just like I am right here. As long as you got all the belts hooked up and the sensors hooked up, I recommend cleaning all infrared sensors like the one here and here before you put it back together. But these are rather durable. The servo was fine, all the gears were fine. It was just the plastic housing. So it was worth the time putting it back together. It was one of those things where you got to start all the way at the easy stuff with sensors, but if it won't do the test mode, it could be your sensor ideally, or it could be what I encountered where there was actual mechanical interference where I actually had to take it apart. But at the end of the day, it worked. Hope anybody learns anything from this. That's the drive motor, these are the speakers, that's the motherboard, that's the interface, and it has an electric motor in there with a drive belt under it and a motor right here, and the controller's right there. There's about 20 screws to put it back together. That's about it. And here we have it. She's all back together and wiped off. We're gonna hit the buttons on her and show proof of concept. Nice and fluent. The speeds all work, all the different relative settings work. If I was going to try to do this the right way, I would have bought that housing that I screwed together, because that would be what would fail in this instance. I'm not sure on the price. I'm not sure if you can acquire the piece, but that would be the OEM repair compared to what I did. But anyway, hope everyone has a good night. Thank you.